And we're going up the canyon, and he's in the passenger seat. I'm driving, lights and sirens. We're going to this call. This lady's calling 911. They're updating us on dispatch. And he's just in the passenger seat. So we get to the call. And before I could stop him, he gets out of the car. He grabs the shotgun. He's all... I'm all, dude, you cannot shoot a bear with the shotgun, bro. The Subaru drivers will not put up with that, bro. Any Subaru drivers in here tonight? Shut up, nobody cares. Nobody cares.
It's time to start telling our own stories. I'm Steve Kellums, and welcome to Blue Canary. We all know how stress can catch up to us in our daily lives. When you're a cop, the stress is always there, on and off the job. Many officers figure out different ways to deal with the stress. Working out and taking up hobbies are some of the most common ways to do that. Today, I'm going to talk to someone who found a different way to deal with their stress and help you deal with yours. Vinnie Montez is a Colorado native and 20-plus year veteran of law enforcement. From his early years as a police explorer to his current assignment as a night shift patrol commander, Vinnie has seen all sides of law enforcement, the good and the bad. In 2007, Vinnie took up comedy to deal with the stress he was feeling from work. The emotional strain had become very difficult to deal with, and comedy was a way for Vinnie to work through that stress. It started at open mic nights, and in 2019, he had his first comedy special debut on Dry Bar Comedy. Vinnie Montez, armed and hilarious. Vinnie is still a full-time cop, but travels and provides entertainment across the country with other comedians like Michelle Wolf, Joe Rogan, Josh Blue, Paul Rodriguez, Gilbert Gottfried, and many, many more. He also loves to give back to the police community and to stand up for police organizations across the country. In 2018, Vinnie was inducted as an official member of Humanizing the Badge, an organization on a mission to help forge stronger relationships between law enforcement officers and the communities they serve. So I wanted to start off by thanking Vinnie for coming on and talking to me. Vinnie, thank you very much for spending some time with me.
Steve, happy to be here.
So the reason I reached out to you, I probably about a year ago, you started popping up on my social media sites, these little clips of you telling jokes, and not just jokes, but I mean jokes about being a cop and about the dealing with citizens as a cop, and your family and all this kind of stuff. And it really made me laugh. You don't see a lot of cop comedians out there. And so it really made me want to reach out and talk to you about, humor and law enforcement and your experience and your background. So let's start with that. Tell me a little bit about you.
So I am a Colorado native. I got into law enforcement in the early 90s as a police explorer. And I've been with the agency I'm with now for pretty much, close to 30 years total. I've been a cop for 23. I just knew from a very young age I wanted to be a cop. I used to watch Ponce and John, Chips, and I just fell in love with it. I fell in love with the fact that they were always helping people, and I know that may sound kind of cliche and corny, but that's the truth about it. And then I got into law enforcement, and I've worked everything you could possibly work, and I worked my way up the ranks. I'm currently commander over night shift patrol where I work, and I hit a wall in 2007, 2008, and I was that cop who was always working. So what I meant by I lived at the Justice Center where our headquarters was out of at the time, and never really took time off and probably lost vacation time and stuff. And a lot of the people around me recognized that as bad because I really wasn't balanced, but I knew better because I was 20 something. And, in my mind, I had been there and done that. And our sheriff at the time, when he took over, he pulled me aside and he had given me Dr. Kevin Gilmartin's book, Emotional Survival for Law Enforcement. And I didn't heed the advice that I was given, of course, because when you're young, you really don't have that perspective. And I'm just open about that because that's the absolute truth.
It is. Nobody wants to pay any attention when you're young, right?
Yeah. And you know it all when you're a young officer. I mean, I certainly did. At least I thought I did. And then I hit this wall where it all came to fruition as far as me hitting that wall in about wintertime 2008, February-ish. And I came across an accident, and I tried to save this kid's life, in short, and I couldn't do it. And I was working on him doing CPR, and the sergeant that finally got there, I was off duty at the time. He put me in his car, and I had this wave of emotion come over me, and I started breaking down. And I was like, I had never lost my composure on a scene before. And it really was a culmination of all the things that I had seen from a very young kid at 16 years old, my first dead body. And I mean, all that stuff that accumulates. And in the 90s, law enforcement wasn't very open about mental health. And, your partners would be like, you good? Yeah, I'm good. You good? Yeah, I'm good. There was no talk about, hey, man, how did that affect you? And so I started reaching out to people, and they're like, you got to find a balance. So I started writing comedy and tried some open mics in Denver at Comedy Works. And it really was a good outlet for me. And I had no idea what it was going to lead to, but it truly started out as an opportunity for me to do something other than copping.
You talked about the emotional survival for law enforcement, and I love that book. I felt like he was looking at my windows and watching me when I read it. How did that affect you when you first started looking into that?
Well, I could see myself in some of the things that he describes, like, being angry, and like, when you get off duty, you think that every cop who's been a cop for a while knows this feeling where they get off duty, they go home, their significant other is asking them, hey, what do you think about this? Or what? And you're like, I don't care. I don't want to, I don't want to answer questions, and I don't want to make decisions. I mean, I don't know if you've had this argument with your significant other. Hey, where do you want to go eat? I don't know. I don't care. Wherever you want to go eat. And you always end up at the same place anyway.
And then they get mad at you, right? They get upset with you because you didn't make a decision, and you're like, I don't want to make a decision. I'm burned out. I'm done. I'm tired.
Yeah, my lady has put her foot down. She's like, look, we're making a decision before we leave the house. We're not going to drive around for 30 minutes, only end up in the same place and waste gas. So, I mean, I've taken it to the nth degree. But when I read that book, I didn't realize all the things that he was talking about until I got to the point where I was living those things that, the cops that are a single identity. And that was the thing. I was copping all the time, and your single identity cannot be tied to being a cop. I mean, this is a very noble, awesome profession. But Vinnie Montez and Vinnie Montez, the cop, were not two different people. They were one person for the most part. And so comedy really helped separate that out. And I've been very lucky, and it's turned into a lot. But I try to share that now. I guess what my mantra is, my mission now, with what I'm doing, is to be open and share that experience, because I think a lot of people still see a lot of taboo around mental health, and I've had to seek out counseling. A matter of fact, today, I'll be frank with you, I'm going to get some EMDR therapy. I've kept up with this, and every now and then I need a little tune-up and a check-in. But there's nothing to be ashamed about that. It's healthy. It's good to talk about it. I really try to expose myself that way to the deputies that I work with, so that they know it's a safe thing to do. And I can't embrace that any more than I am, other than to say I've struggled with it most of my career. And it's nothing to be ashamed of. It's just acknowledgement that, hey, you do take some damage to your armor over the course of being a cop. That's it.
You talked about some of the challenges that you had, and recognizing, back in the day, we looked at PTSD as being one single event. And now we know that you have this cumulative PTSD that builds up over time. And you talked about all these little things until finally it just hits you like a big wet blanket over the head, and you don't know what to do next. I love the fact you called it a tune-up, because I think that's an excellent way to look at it and express to other people the importance of it. Just like getting your oil changed in the car, just getting a little tune-up to make sure that you're moving the way you should. I like that.
Yeah, I think it's what we have to do. Our organization has been really good about listening and paying attention to the current trends in law enforcement. We have our ability now for our deputies to go and seek out counseling at an organization, a clinician that runs, I don't think she'd mind me saying, Jamie Broward and Associates out of Colorado. She has an organization which is specifically built and geared towards law enforcement professionals. So the people that work there, they understand cops, because it's hard to, I'll be very honest with you. When I first started seeking help as far as counseling, we have an EAP program. We did have an EAP program where I work, an employee assistance program, and that would help people reach out to counselors. And I was going to see people that were recommended in the local area, but I'd sit there and talk to these people, and I'd be like, "Man, you have no idea," or I'd be describing something that I would see, and I'm looking at their face, and they're cringing, and they're like, "Oh my goodness, can we make?" I literally felt like, "Can you stop? Because you're freaking me out." And us as cops, we're constantly reading the room, reading people, diagnosing what they are. And I didn't feel like they were getting me. And quite frankly, they weren't. So it's important that you talk to somebody that's really in the field or has experience of dealing with cops. And now we have a group inside of our organization. Forgive me, I can't remember the acronym right now, and I can't believe it. Anyway, it's officers within our organization who are dedicated to listening to other cops. And so they can reach out to them. Oh, peer support. Peer support. That organization has done a really good job for getting grants so officers can go to these clinicians that are specially trained for law enforcement. And it's been great. I'm really proud of the fact that our agency has taken the lead on that to make it better for our deputies.
I think humor is such a big part, at least it is for me, from the mental health side of, just laughing and letting that go. And you took it to the whole next level. You started actually creating that comedy. And I got to tell you, you're telling the joke about the ice cream cone.
Yeah.
And I am losing it. And my wife is looking at me like I'm weird. And I'm like, oh no, this has happened to me. This is hilarious.
Well, that is an actual true story. Now, the ending where I'm like licking the ice cream cone like crazy is a little bit embellished, but that really happened. I went to McDonald's. I was in line, and this guy has a medical issue and collapses, and so I pull up, and one of our FTOs showed up with his recruit, and he's like, "Of course, Vinny's at McDonald's," and I can already tell there was, cops are very good about giving each other a very hard time, or we call it, give them a ration. And I was like, come on. And so, of course, everybody starts showing up, and there comes the dude with my ice cream cone. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm totally outed. And people are, anybody who's been in this job, you can't make mistakes. And what I mean by that, it's not like you can't, but you're going to take a ration,
right.
For example, I crashed my car into a pole. I literally skewered like a shish kebab, my cop car I was driving with my lights out, trying to catch up to these guys. And I skewered my car, and the sergeant had to get there. This is early on in my career, and they had to jump up and down on the hood so I could back it off. And everybody in the agency knew about it. That spreads like wildfire. And I happened to go to a range day very soon after that. The sheriff was there, and he's laughing. He's telling me, slapping me on the back. He's like, "Man, that's funny," And I'm like, "Oh my gosh, Sheriff, I'm glad you're taking it so well. I thought I was going to get in trouble." And without missing a beat, he looks right at me. He's like, "It's funny, but you're going to get in trouble." and so, that's what I mean by you take dents in the armor, but you can't be so serious all the time, because cops, we use humor as a coping mechanism. I do a different show for law enforcement groups when it's strictly law enforcement than I do for the public, because
I was going to ask you that if cops responded differently to different types of humor.
Oh, sure. I will tell you flat out. I have this joke. It's based on a real situation. And I referred to the fact that if you've been following me, but some of the talks I've given, I talk about people that I've lost, colleagues, friends that I've lost, people I looked up to over the course of my career, from being an explorer all the way to today. Many officers, at least a half a dozen in our agency, have taken their own life, either during the time affiliated or post-employment. And that's a very sad thing. And one of my recruits that took his life, we were on a very serious call, and it was a suicide. So it wasn't an action-packed kind of event, but it was straight up a guy who had taken a shotgun, sat in the passenger seat of his car, and taken the entire part of his head off. And I know that's kind of graphic and detailed, but the point of this is, those are the things that we have to deal with.
Yeah.
And one of my colleagues who I grew up with as an explorer, at the time I was a patrol deputy, I had a recruit with me, and the detective showed up. We came up as explorers together. And, you got to identify the person who's passed away. So he's rooting through the guy's wallet, and he finds his identification, and he holds it up to us. He covers the head on the picture with his thumb. And he's like, do you think this is our guy right here? Now, the only people around,
Right.
the only people around were the recruit, myself, the dead guy, the coroner's guy, and just the cops. But that is a mechanism. We take the situation very seriously, but this is a very dark scene to be on. You see things that nobody else sees. It's not normal. And so cops have a coping mechanism of using humor in those situations or in other situations to decompress and talk about the things that they deal with. And I will tell you, I did that joke when I first wrote it out and I presented it. I did it in an open mic in Denver with a crowd of hipsters. And I told that joke and it was dead silent. So like literally I could tell them to like get off the stage. And then I do that same joke for a law enforcement group. As a matter of fact, I debuted it in Ohio at the First Responders Bridge Conference. The room absolutely exploded because every single person could relate to what I was talking to.
Oh yeah, as soon as you said it, I started laughing and chuckling because I could picture an entire room of people going, "I don't get it."
Yeah, right.
What's he talking about? And then of course, and the ones who do get it are like, "Oh, that's disgusting. You shouldn't make a joke about that." But I've seen cops jump down. I mean, I've seen them sit down on the couch next to the dead body, take a selfie.
Oh my gosh, I don't know about that, but okay.
You're like, dude, what's wrong with you? And then you start giggling, and then everybody giggles, and it's just this horrible kind of black humor. But I think, as you said, it helps us cope with all that, the bad stuff that we see a lot. And I know it's really, like I said, it's very important to me, and your stuff's pretty funny. What does your family think about? I mean, obviously, since you got into law enforcement as an explorer, which is a wonderful program, and it's very cool to hear that you continued through explorers all the way up to a career. But, what do they feel about the comedy side? Usually you probably get asked, what do they feel about you being a cop? I'm interested. What do they feel about you being on stage, a comedian?
I think my family was very supportive of it because they thought, I'm doing something, positive, but I don't know that anybody knew that it was going to turn into what it's turned into. And so I think my mom was like, I can tell you frankly, early on, I started writing about my mom because I think my mom is hilarious and she's so old school. She is the tough, quintessential mom who, doesn't put up with much from, when we were growing up. And I hate to say it, but this is the truth. Whatever slipper, spatula was around, if you got out of the line, you're going to catch a little bit, right?
Right.
But the greatest woman I've, known, that's my mom. And, she always took up for me, and I wrote her into some bits where she's my backup on patrol. And
did she really ride along with you? Oh
yeah, my mom's rode along with me, and
awesome.
I will not joke. She hasn't actually got out of the car and tuned anybody up, but she would. If I was fighting with some dude, I guarantee you my mom could not sit there. She would be like, and she's 75 years old now, but she'll still throw down if she had to, I'm sure. But I think they loved it, and they didn't realize what it was going to turn into, and now it's something more where they see. I think truly they see that it's so beneficial to me for my mental health and my happiness, because it truly separates me from Vinnie the cop and in that mode of, always being so serious and, that whole thing. So I think that we're in a good spot. And I think that I embarrassed myself one time because somebody brought my mom. I never cussed in front of my mom growing up. I just didn't do it. I'd catch a backhand. And I was performing at a club in Denver, and my mom has a very distinct laugh and sneeze. And in the middle of my set, I heard her laugh, and I had been cussing partially throughout the whole set. And I was like, oh my goodness, my mom is in the crowd. And I just about fainted because I was like, holy cow, I've never cussed for my mom. She didn't bring it up after the show. I never said anything about it. But that was, that's something that is special to me because, I have that great relationship with my mom, and my brother thinks that comedy is good for me. I don't think anybody thinks it's bad just because it keeps me in a better space.
Blue Canary is here to help you tell your stories, and I couldn't do that without the help of some very generous sponsors. Let's take a quick break to hear from one.
Help your team rise to increasing expectations with Agency 360's cloud-based software. Whether it is for the training of new employees or annual performance evaluations, Agency 360 can help trainers and supervisors streamline documentation, create consistency, and communicate clearly. Help retention by setting the tone and culture early with Agency 360. Learn more at agency360.com. That's AGENCY360.com.
What do the other comedians that you're sharing the stage with think about you being a cop?
I think that was a touchy subject when I first started because people were really concerned. They're like, we got a cop amidst us. And our Denver comedy community is very close. But I will tell you this, after being with them for 13, 14 years now, especially a lot of people who have stuck around and stuck it out in the community, I can honestly say I've earned, and I use the word earned very carefully, I've earned a lot of the people's respect in that group. When I'm doing comedy, I'm not there to be their mom, dad. I'm not on duty, and I really don't have people doing stuff in front of me because they know what I do. And I don't get into it. I mean, people do smoke marijuana. It's legal in Colorado. I don't get tripped up about it. I don't do it, but, it's there. I will tell you that with the recent times, the time that I've spent with them and them getting to know me has established a rapport for them to not judge law enforcement. And let me be very clear what I mean. My interaction with them and them seeing me as a real person behind the scenes doing stand-up comedy, a lot of them, and I've been told by some of them, look, man, if I wouldn't have known you, if I didn't know you, I would immediately probably judge cops like everybody else. And I've had one friend who is a very good comedian. His name is Troy Walker. He's out of California now. He came up on the scene with me here. And he's actually a lawyer, like an actual lawyer. But he does stand-up comedy. And he always texts me, like he sees things around the country and he'll be like, hey, V, can you give me your perspective? And I do. And so I'm very humbled by the fact that I get to be around these people who are influential, sending messages and talking to people on social media and so forth. And they're actually asking my opinion and giving me a chance to reflect on some of the things that they're seeing in the media. And they trust me enough to ask me about it. And I'm humbled by that very fact. So I think it's a good thing for us in law enforcement.
Do you think you've affected any of their bits by, just talking to them and interacting with them? Do any of them that might have gone really hardcore anti-police just because of the times that might have backed off a little bit of that because of their experiences with you?
I don't have any examples of that for sure, but I think that I do come up in their mind based on the conversations I have with them about things like that. Somebody took something I said out of or not said, but something I created out of context once. And a lot of people who didn't know me got in an uproar about it. And I will tell you, I can honestly say the Denver comedy community, the people that knew me, came to my defense as a police officer. And I will forever be in gratitude for that, because I couldn't believe how many people are like, no, you don't know him like that. That's not who he is. He's a very good dude. And I was very proud of the fact that that happened. So, when you try to approach things from a good heart and you really treat people well, and that's the thing is I treat all those people very well, and I help them with their comedy if I can, give them feedback. They help me with mine. We share the stage together, and I'll tell you what, it's really paid a lot of dividends for me, because I've learned a lot from them too, because they walk a different side of what we see. And I think that's really what people are trying to say. I know that there's a lot of people that are being harsh on cops and saying, everybody sucks and things like that. But there is another side to it that you and I never got to walk through. You can't judge another man or woman because you haven't walked in their steps. And people have the right to have their perspective. Some of the bashing that's going on and collecting, saying all cops are bad and things like that, that's absolutely wrong. But people do have different perspectives. And the fact that I've been able to sit down and have conversations with these other comedians, it's enlightened me to understand that the perspective and the history and some of the things that have happened in their own personal lives has impacted them. And it's not just what the media has said, it's about their own experiences. I'll be quite frank with you, Steve, when I hear that people have told me stories about cops mistreating them in certain situations, it infuriates me. And I don't have any reason to disbelieve those people, but I know that's not the majority of officers, because you and I both know that there's ton of men and women in these organizations across the country that are doing the best that they can, and they're great people. But there are bad apples out there, and nobody's going to, from our perspective, is going to deny that. Simply said, we just have to be open to listening to other perspectives.
That's really interesting, because a lot of my career I spent traveling around and teaching, which I still do today. And I thought that experiences with all these other agencies, big and small, really helped me in my law enforcement career. And I can really see exactly what you're talking about, how these experiences with a complete non-law enforcement side could really help bring some perspective to what you're doing and remind you of why you started doing it in the first place, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that what you just said is, remind us. I go back full circle to what we started talking about the separation between Vinnie the cop at work and Vinnie the person outside of work. My interaction with the comedians in the Denver comedy scene and the other people I've traveled with around the country has kept me separated from just having that one perspective when you're at work all the time. And I think that's been exceptionally good. Plus, the other thing I will tell people listening to this podcast, if you're starting your career out, the one other piece of advice, who am I to give advice, but I just share this as a tidbit for people to take. You got to have friends that are non-cop.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's so critical. I have a young, they're the same age as me. I have friends from college at the University of Colorado I went to school with, and they're in my life. And when I was coming up as a young officer, they would remind me, hey, dude, you're getting a little bit too coppish here. You're going, because I would, I'd be so excited that all I would talk about when we were off duty was like, oh, we did this and we did this and this. And they're like, can we talk about anything besides copping? Because there's so much more to life than just that. And when you're in that frame as a young officer, you're like, what are you talking about? Like, this is real stuff. And it's true. But you also got to do all the other stuff that all the normal people do so that you keep some form of normality in your life so that you can maintain that balance. So what I'm just saying is keep those other people that are non-cops in your life so they can keep you balanced.
Couldn't agree with you more. I think that's some excellent advice. How do the officers that work for you think about your comedy job? And are they always hitting you up saying, tell us a joke?
No, I don't think any of them think I'm funny because they don't. They don't see me as, I don't think a lot of them, especially the new deputies, they don't see me as funny. As a matter of fact, all the commanders and the people that I grew up with that have been there as long as I have, they constantly tell me that I'm not funny and that they're funnier than me and they should open for me and maybe take over my comedy career. Just the ration that
right.
You expect, right?
Typical stuff.
And then the young officers, or the ones who've been there for a while, they're very complimentary. They're like, cool, man, I'm glad you're doing that. But they never ask me that kind of stuff. In the role that I'm in, I think they simply see me as the commander, and they see me all the time and I'm not being funny all the time. I'm, doing my normal job. I joke around a lot with the troops because I think that's very important that, they think that you're approachable and so forth. And I love our people in our organization, but they just don't see me in that light. And then when I go on the road or I do a comedy show, everybody's always, so positive about it. It's just a different person when I'm at work versus when I'm off and being the comedian Vinnie Montez. It's distinctly a different persona.
Now, as your role as that comedian and having that cop background, you're doing a lot for the law enforcement community. You're traveling a lot. You're speaking and doing stand-up routines at a lot of these organizations and groups. It feels a little bit like giving back. Is that the way you look at it?
Well, I'm glad. It's great that you asked that. Yes, I absolutely want to give back, and I do that as part of what I do. In 2018, I was fortunate enough to be brought on as an official member of Humanize the Badge. With people that have worked in this organization like Officer Daniels, Mike the Cop, Oh No, It's the Popo, Deputy Bookham and Hookham. All these great personalities that are actual law enforcement officers or retired officers around the country, with the whole emphasis on working with the community to humanize the badge. But going back to 2011 real quick, when I got into comedy, 2008-ish, 2007, 2008, I was dabbling in it. I was just trying to figure things out. And one of the first things that you will learn as a comedian is you need to get stage time. No matter what stage time you can get, do it. Because the only way to get good, just like anything else in life, whether you're shooting or you're running or whatever it is, you got to do it a lot. And it was hard to get stage time, especially anything more than like a 5 or 10 minute set. So in 2011, I believe it was, I was approached by one of the agencies that's north of us, and they had a sergeant at the time who had needed a liver transplant. And they're like, hey, Vinny, you do comedy, right? And I was like, yeah. And I had 7 minutes I could do at that time tight. 7 minutes.
7 minutes.
Now, mind you, a headline set anywhere around the country is 45 minutes or more, right?
Right.
And so they're like, and at the time I was DJing, moonlighting with one of the guys I work with. We were DJing on the side, which I love music. And so I had all the gear, and they're like, we can get the space, and, can you do anything? And I was like, oh yeah. So I gathered some of my friends. We put a poster together, and we hosted the show in Longmont, Colorado. And they sold like almost 400 tickets and raised over $10,000 for this sergeant in one night. And I brought my friends, and I closed the show, and it was just really awesome. And so that gave me a taste that I had the ability to draw people in. And so there were other things where I would be doing things for free and just helping out, like that show. And it really made me feel good because I was able to give back, and I was getting to be somebody that was not the cop. I was being the comedian. And it just turned out that a lot of the people I know growing up past 2011, my partner in narcotics, he ended up needing a heart transplant, and I was able to do a comedy show for him to raise funds. My mentor, who was a division chief, retired now where I worked, he ended up having to have a liver transplant also. And I was able to do some shows for him. And then I just helped out along the way with other organizations and shared my gift of comedy. I had no idea it was going to turn into all that, but it did. And I still do that every year. I pick some shows around the country where I'll do those for free. I think it's important because my beginnings were humble. I don't want to ever lose sight of that. And I kind of tell that to our deputies all the time too. It was like, and I'm sure you came up through the ranks as well. I did some research on you. I remember when I was a reserve deputy, just after I became an explorer, and I was like, oh my God, I've made it. I can't believe I'm finally wearing the blue uniform. And I was so happy. And then that wasn't enough. I was like, if I could just be a regular full-time deputy, and I became a deputy. And then if I could just be a DUI cop, I got that. And if I could be a detective, I'm a detective. Oh man, I just could be a narcotics detective. And I was a narcotics detective. Can I be a sergeant? Can I be a commander? And it never stops. The thing I always try to remember back to myself is when we first started is just remember where you came from. Remember when you were that young explorer who just desired to be a cop, and it was a privilege just to put on that first uniform as a reserve deputy. And, I won't say that sometimes I get carried away with my own ego, because sometimes I do, and I'm just being honest about it. Over the course of my career, I thought I was all that in a bag of chips, like I started this conversation with you when I was a young officer. And I had to learn those lessons the hard way. But now, and everything that I've gone through with comedy, I just try to remember where I came from and what I started with. When somebody gave me that first chance at Comedy Works in Denver to do 2 minutes, and now I'm able to share this gift with people around the country, and I get paid for it. And I'm like, wow, what a complete turnaround. So yeah, that's Vinnie Montez in a nutshell right there.
That's awesome. So thank you so much. What's in the future for Vinnie? What are you doing? What's the plan for the rest of the year, next couple of years? Where do you see yourself?
So I was like, for me, I was doing well. March 13th, 2020, things were good. I was getting ready to fly out.
Like the rest of us.
I was getting ready to fly out to San Diego for a show. I think it was on the 14th of March in 2020 for San Diego Sheriff's Office Association for all their deputies, and COVID shut everything down. And I got that back on the schedule. I think it's in August again this year. But it really put a big hold on everything. And so I was worried, is comedy going to come back? And I got to tell you, in the last month, bookings are just going crazy. And I think people are more hungry now for comedy than they ever were. And I'm working on a new hour. I want an opportunity to do another special. My first special came out in 2019 on Dry Bar, Vinnie Montez, Armed and Hilarious. And I was just like totally taken aback that I got that opportunity.
And it is hilarious too, by the way. Absolutely love that special.
Thank you. I want to tell all the people that are listening to this. Yes, I did refer to the people as millennials or entering the police force. And yes, I probably was wrong categorizing them as millennials and they're actually Z generation. But like, that's the thing I think is funny is like, you watch the comments on anything you say online, like if you are off even in the slightest, there's somebody there that's doing the audit for you nonstop to make sure you use the exact right terminology. But yeah, that's what's ahead for me. Hopefully another opportunity to do a special. I've submitted for some big festivals, and I am now represented by CWE, and it's just been a great opportunity with my agent, and I'm just doing everything I can. So I'm traveling. My next stop is next week. I will be in Omaha, Nebraska. I'll be doing a corporate event. And the next night I'm at Funny Bone on May 20th. And so I'm excited.
Again, thanks so much for coming on and talk to me. This has been fantastic. And, your story, I think, is phenomenal. I think it's very helpful for new officers to listen to. And, taking those lessons that you brought up about separating that cop job from everyday life that you have to have. And it's really important for your mental health. And I just want to thank you for sharing that.
Thanks. And I just want to close with one last thing. And that is to say to any of the young officers or veteran officers who are listening to this, I'm not preaching at you. I'm just sharing my side of the story of the tribulations I went through and the things that I made mistakes with. And I never want to come across any group or any people that I'm telling them what they should or should not do. Because frankly, I didn't listen to anybody that was giving me good advice when I was in that position. I just want to share my story so people know that it's okay to reach out for help. 3 times as many officers kill themselves in the line of duty every year than actually die in the line of duty. And so that's a big number, whether it's reaching out to a friend or a colleague that's around you or somebody that you trust outside of law enforcement. Men and women in this organizations across the country that are part of law enforcement, EMS, whatever it is, don't be afraid to reach out. Don't be afraid or hesitant to think people are going to judge you, because people would rather hear you, support you, get behind you than ever see you take your life. And I just want to be clear about that.
And that's the story we have to tell. Thank you for joining. As always, I'm curious what questions you're getting asked. What isn't the news covering? What story needs to be told? Connect with me at bluecanarypodcast@gmail.com.